Here's a challenge. Can you find a contract stored in a legacy database, a support ticket in ServiceNow, and a conversation in Teams, all with the same Microsoft 365 search bar? Most organizations can't. But what if you could? This isn't just a nice to have. It could completely change how you access knowledge and make decisions. What's hiding in your data? The high cost of invisible knowledge. If you've ever tracked down a stray invoice for your CTO, you know the feeling. You get a ping, leadership needs an answer fast. You start with SharePoint but come up empty. Then it's a wild hunt across a legacy CRM, a forgotten file share, maybe even that oddball ticketing tool your team inherited years ago. 10 minutes deep and the clock's ticking louder. By the time you find the answer, it's either outdated, missing key details, or tucked away somewhere nobody else would even know to look. Sound familiar? You're definitely not alone. Most organizations walk around thinking that our data is in the cloud, it's organized, we've got Microsoft 365, so we're covered. But the truth is, plenty of critical insights aren't making it into the systems you spend time in every day. Let's talk about where things usually go off the rails. You've got SharePoint sites humming along nice and tidy. Teams channels are a little messy, but at least searchable. But then there's the shadow world, legacy databases running under someone's desk, old SQL servers behind the firewall, maybe that clunky half-retired CRM your sales lead swears by but nobody else trusts. Or worse, a ticketing app that nobody loves but everyone still needs for that one weird process. You end up with these silos, each with its own rules, its own quirks, and usually a long-forgotten set of permissions and logins. At first, it feels manageable. After all, every business has a few oddball systems. But when the pressure's on and you need information right now, those cracks become canyons. There's a story I hear way more often than I'd like. Operations teams often get burned by versions gone missing. A mid-sized medical company once missed a contract renewal with a key supplier, not because they didn't negotiate or store the deal, but because the most recent signed version lived outside SharePoint in a procurement app built 6 years ago. Everyone thought the final contract was on the shared drive. Turns out it was 2 versions behind. By the time someone finally pieced things together, the window for renegotiation had closed. The fallout wasn't just embarrassment. It meant paying higher rates for the next year and wasting days scrambling for damage control. It's easy to shrug off these incidents as bad luck or growing pains, when really it's the same story playing out everywhere. According to Gartner, employees spend nearly a fifth of their work week, about 20%, just searching for information. That's an entire day's worth of productivity lost every week per person. Multiply that by your headcount, and the real cost starts to take shape. It doesn't look like lost revenue on the books, but it's time people aren't innovating, serving customers, or chasing new deals. Worse, it leads to expensive workarounds. Teams give up on finding knowledge, so they duplicate effort. I've seen engineering departments rebuild work because nobody could find the original documentation. Legal teams file brand new contracts from scratch rather than letting legal ops sift through 9 tools. And let's not downplay the compliance headaches. Missed audits, lost versions, unauthorized access, all because somebody stored a sensitive file in the only system nobody ever checks. It's honestly like having a row of safes bolted to the wall, each stuffed with important files, but you can only remember the combination for the first one. The rest, the treasure is inside. You just can't get to it. And at scale, when you're adding new systems every year through M&A, new department tools, or aging platforms, nobody dares retire. Unlocking these digital vaults gets harder. Every out-of-reach insight doesn't just slow you down, it can cost real money, reputation, and even legal standing. Multiply that bottleneck by the size of your company, and soon the whole knowledge infrastructure starts working against you. Leadership wants fast answers, but the company's memory is fragmented. First-line workers can't find customer issues from 6 months ago. The finance team spends more time tracing numbers than interpreting them. Even your most tech-savvy employees start building their own private indexes. It's not just lost time, it's lost trust. Here's where unified search comes off the shelf and stops being a technical wish list item. Imagine if all those silos, legacy, cloud, weird one-off apps fed into a single search bar. One place to look no matter what system, format, or department your answer lives in. What changes? Suddenly that urgent leadership question isn't a fire drill. Compliance doesn't need heroics. Subject matter experts aren't gatekeepers. You get the real value out of all the information you already own, but just can't leverage today. At the end of the day, the value of enterprise search is about more than speed. It's about surfacing business critical answers that are hiding in plain sight. The missing contract, the lost support ticket, the forgotten policy, they're only invisible because of barriers we've accepted as normal. Taking down those barriers isn't about magic, it's about making the right connections. And that's where custom connectors step in. Custom connectors, the secret to a truly unified search. Think about the last time you needed to find a really specific document, a contract buried in ERP, a customer email, or maybe even a support ticket from ServiceNow. You pop open your Microsoft search bar, type in what you need, and nothing. No results. It's frustrating, especially when you know that the data is somewhere in your organization's universe of systems, just not in the official SharePoint or Outlook spots. Microsoft 365 Search is great right out of the box for what it was built to cover. You get SharePoint, Teams, Outlook, and those core clouds all sewn together, which feels pretty solid until the moment you step outside those boundaries. The problem is most companies lean on a patchwork of business tools, some bought, some homegrown, some inherited from a merger or acquisition. The result? Dozens of platforms running quietly in the background, doing valuable work, but totally invisible to your search bar. What usually happens next is the kind of workaround that keeps IT teams up at night. Instead of a unified, reliable search, people fall back on exporting entire tables from legacy databases, emailing CSVs around, or generating manual PDF reports just to move data between islands. Even if these files eventually make it to SharePoint, you're always chasing the freshest version. And every time someone rekeys data, the risk of human error goes up. Reports get out of date fast. You introduce lag. Sometimes you end up with 5 conflicting spreadsheets floating around like digital litter. The speed bump turns into a speed trap. And let's be honest, nobody ever remembers what folder or library the final draft actually landed in. Let's walk through how this plays out on the front lines. Imagine an operations manager fielding a call from a customer who wants the status of a repair. To get a simple answer, she has to toggle between a ticketing tool, an internal database for equipment tracking, an aging ERP for invoices, and email for updates, plus SharePoint for the latest safety policy. Every system has its own login, its own search, and its own quirks. It's not that the information isn't in there somewhere, it's just locked up with no obvious way to pull it all together. Each minute spent jumping between tabs adds stress and multiplies the chance for mistakes or missed details. Now, here's where things get interesting and a bit more hopeful. Microsoft spotted this problem and started opening the doors with what they call custom connectors. If you haven't gone down this road yet, the idea is straightforward. Give Microsoft 365 Search the ability to see beyond its household platforms. Custom connectors allow you to securely index content from pretty much anywhere. Legacy SQL databases, bespoke business apps, partner portals, even platforms your company built years ago and never fully integrated into your cloud. The kicker? It doesn't stop at the cloud. You can point search at on-premises data, mission-critical line of business systems, or anything with an API that can be wrangled into shape. And it's not just a tool for heavy-duty developers. Modern Microsoft Graph connectors include both low-code and pro-code options. That means your Power Platform enthusiasts can stand up basic connectors without deep development work. If you've got deeper needs or need to transform data on the fly, you can write custom code and tap into the full Graph API feature set. Either way, you're lowering the bar for integration and making it way easier than in the days when you had to maintain a brittle search crawler or do nightly exports between servers. The connectors handle security, permissions, and indexing, all centralized under Azure AD governance, so you aren't losing sleep about unaudited access or rogue scrapes. Want something less theoretical? Take the story of a US-based manufacturing firm dealing with decades of safety reports stuck in an old IBM system. Legal compliance meant these reports needed to be accessible but not open to just anyone on the shop floor. By using a custom connector, they pulled those records into Microsoft Search, securely mapped to the right groups. So when the safety team searched for an incident or an audit record, it came up alongside the usual SharePoint and Teams content. No more hunting through the old system, no more waiting for IT to run a query every time somebody needed to pull data for OSHA or an internal review. That's not just a nice to have, it's a game changer for compliance and operational efficiency. Picture what happens when your main search bar goes from being just another tool in your digital toolbox to a real front door to your organization's entire knowledge base. It can surface customer contracts, troubleshooting guides, invoices, historical project data, whatever you've indexed. Suddenly, every department from sales and support to legal and HR has instant access to the info that matters exactly when they need it. No more silos, no more waiting on the one person who knows the system. The barriers come down, and in their place is a simple, powerful way to leverage the knowledge you already own but couldn't reach before. At its core, custom connectors aren't just dissolving silos for technical bragging rights. They're rebalancing information access. Every employee, regardless of department or seniority, can reach the documents, records, and resources that matter most for their role. That kind of visibility changes how teams collaborate, how fast you respond to clients, and how well you keep up with the everyday demands of modern business. But while unified search brings speed and access, there's an even bigger payoff lurking under the surface. Search isn't just about finding things faster, it's about real business outcomes, smarter decisions, less risk, and new ways to unlock value from your data. Let's look at what happens when search becomes part of your core business strategy, not just an IT project. Beyond speed, the strategic ROI of unified search. When people talk about search, it almost always circles back to saving a few minutes here or there. It's easy to reduce the whole thing to fewer clicks, a couple of seconds cut from daily routines. But if you keep the conversation on speed, you completely miss the larger payoff. In the boardroom, leadership doesn't want to hear that your new tooling shaved off 12 keystrokes per user. They want real numbers. They want to know, does unifying all these search experiences actually deliver anything meaningful to revenue, to risk, or to employee output? A lot of IT projects promise the world and produce little more than dashboards nobody checks. So what changes if you actually take search beyond SharePoint indexes and start pulling in every corner of your company's knowledge stack? Let's get practical. One of the real areas where unified search has moved the needle is legal operations. Legal teams live and die by quick, reliable access to the right version of a contract or agreement. In organizations relying on multiple document repositories, finding every single updated contract used to mean searching a SharePoint library, tracking shared drives, digging up records from a procurement system, and maybe asking a few folks in finance if they had the latest copy. Legal teams at a large insurance firm rolled out a unified search platform driven by custom connectors. Suddenly, every relevant contract surfaced in one query, regardless of where it was originally stored. The turnaround for getting agreements prepped for review dropped by almost a third. The impact wasn't just on cycle times. The legal department finally had a single source of truth, trimming down duplicate agreements, surfacing expired clauses, and making missed renewals the exception rather than the rule. It didn't just save time, it changed the way they did business under regulatory scrutiny. And here's where unified search gets even more interesting: analytics. The moment you turn on custom verticals, you get hard data about what's being searched, how often, and where users keep running into dead ends. For example, the search team at a global retailer spotted a pattern. Tons of queries targeting their legacy warehouse database, but hardly any hits returned. That insight flipped a switch for IT. The team realized they needed to prioritize indexing that system. Instead of making gut calls about which data mattered, they targeted integration based on real user demand. On the other hand, some verticals hardly got touched, even though hours were spent maintaining connections. Now, search analytics are feeding directly into IT roadmaps, deciding what gets migrated, retired, or expanded. Compliance and audit work are another big winner with unified search. When you pull all data sources into a centralized search platform, you aren't just making life easier for users. You give risk and compliance teams a single place to run queries, perform e-discovery, and confirm historic records across all lines of business. During an audit or investigation, that means fewer surprises, less scrambling to collect evidence, and tighter controls over who can see what. Instead of 14 back and forths with 4 system owners, all the data is indexed, permissioned, and trackable in one place. The legal exposure goes down, audit cycles get shorter, and compliance efforts shift from firefighting to process improvement. But there's another dynamic at play most organizations don't think about until it's too late: knowledge retention. When a subject matter expert leaves, whether it's voluntary or not, You're not only losing a person, you're losing the story behind 100 projects, key decisions, and pieces of tribal knowledge. If their work notes, reference docs, and email threads are scattered or trapped in their systems, nobody stands a chance of picking up where they left off. In companies that prioritize unified search, the intellectual capital of your best people doesn't just vanish on their last day. Their insights remain findable and useful, supporting handovers or onboarding far beyond what a static checklist or how-to doc can provide. There's a quiet but very real competitive impact, too. Organizations that actually harness all their data for decision making can move faster, spot patterns earlier, and react to market changes with more certainty. If your leadership wants to know how many past clients bought the same service or what compliance risks lurk in a specific geography, a single search delivers those answers. Instead of kicking off a week-long cross-team hunt, teams stop reinventing the same PowerPoint or filling out forms the old way. That time gets reinvested in actual business growth. All that said, the return on investment here isn't just some dashboard showing seconds saved. You're delivering better compliance, real knowledge sharing, and the kind of operational agility that actually changes outcomes. It's fewer costly fire drills and more smart, confident decision making. Plus, you foster a work culture where sharing and actually finding company knowledge is the default, not the exception. So that leaves a key question. Which types of organizations actually see the biggest impact from unified search? And what does it take to turn all this potential into reality? Let's dig into who benefits most and what the first steps really look like if you want to move the needle in your business. Who wins with advanced M365 search and how to start? Unified search sounds like the kind of upgrade every organization should rush to adopt, but in practice, not every business will see the same level of benefits. Some companies already have most of their data cleanly centralized in one suite with minimal legacy baggage. In those environments, the gains from custom connectors or advanced search might feel marginal. The needle moves most for organizations that are swimming in regulations, working across time zones, or weighed down by years of technical debt. Financial services, healthcare, biotech, energy, these are just a few examples where regulations build walls between systems and business moves too quickly for manual workarounds. Highly regulated industries often have to juggle document retention, audit trails, and strict separation of sensitive information. Getting all those requirements met without giving up productivity has always been a balancing act. Hybrid workforces amplify the challenge. When your team sprawls across home offices, labs, clinics, and the odd branch location, the impact of not being able to find what you need multiplies. One team member stuck searching on a VPN, another using company cloud storage, a third digging through an ancient ERP still running in a closet. Pretty soon, nobody's on the same page. Now add acquisitions, which always come with their own surprise set of business systems that don't talk to your existing stack. If you've ever had to explain to a new colleague why there are 3 different HR portals, you know exactly the kind of integration headaches that slow down onboarding and drag out routine processes. Smaller teams sometimes shrug this off, assuming their scale keeps them safe. But the risk is there even if the numbers are lower. All it takes is one piece of lost knowledge, the latest regulatory approval, the correct SOP, the signed-off pricing sheet, to stall a project or set off a panic. There's a story from a mid-sized biotech company that's worth mentioning here. They had a growing library of research data stored on a mix of in-lab systems, SharePoint, and a specialized compliance database. When it came time for an audit, they had to scramble, regulatory reports in one tool, supporting lab notes in another, and final certifications stashed in a flat file system. The result? Weeks spent chasing documents and fielding questions from regulators. After moving to a unified search model, they pulled those data sources together with custom connectors tailored for regulatory documentation. The next time an audit came around, pulling complete records took minutes, not months. Projects stayed on track, compliance risks shrank, and morale went up because people weren't wasting their expertise on hide and seek. Some assume building custom connectors is a moonshot, a mountain of custom code, and 6 months of engineering. Reality is much less dramatic. With the rise of Microsoft's Power Platform and Graph APIs, you can stand up useful connectors without deep developer resources. Power Automate lets business analysts or IT admins Build out connections for straightforward data sources using a visual flow editor. If unique business logic or advanced security mapping is needed, you can bring in a developer or use the Graph API directly. The process feels closer to configuring than coding for most vanilla integrations. That's a big deal for IT teams already stretched thin. Microsoft ships a decent menu of out-of-the-box connectors that can get you 80% of the way there for common systems, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Azure SQL, you name it. But real business advantage starts with custom solutions, indexing niche databases, proprietary warehouse management systems, or that in-house app nobody wants to rewrite. Custom connectors let you carve pathways to the off-the-map knowledge that gives your business its edge. If you leave those data islands out, there's a good chance your employees are missing answers that would save everyone a headache. There's data to back up the promise too. Organizations investing in unified search routinely report higher employee satisfaction, faster onboarding, and fewer knowledge lost incidents. Faster document discovery means projects stay on schedule and new hires don't get caught in the maze. Search analytics become vital here, surfacing patterns about which sources deliver value, what's getting searched, what's being ignored, and where dead ends still frustrate users. If you skip the analytics, you lose your feedback loop. Features or connectors that looked good on paper might flop in the real world. Continuous improvement, driven by real usage data, is the secret to keeping your search ecosystem useful over the long haul. Those who treat search as a living system, constantly tuning sources and retiring stale content, capture the most value. It isn't just an IT win. Business, legal, risk, and product teams all have skin in the game. Search becomes the heartbeat of how people work, not just a hidden feature. Which leads to a bigger question. If the tools are easier, the benefits real, and the feedback built in, what's still keeping your search bar from being the most useful coworker in the building? Maybe it's time to rethink what yours could do. Enterprise search isn't just another place to stash old files. It's how your organization keeps its collective knowledge alive and accessible. Think about what happens when every contract, decision, and lesson learned is actually findable, not buried in a forgotten database or locked up in a custom app only one team understands. A smart search bar working at full capacity isn't just a tool, it's your organizational memory on demand. At this point, settling for the status quo keeps insight just out of reach. Your data doesn't need another vault, it needs a front door.